being on this side of it and being in the meeting room with him, you also actually get to see the cerebral side of his approach and what he understands, and taking a look at the different things that he can do based on what he sees out in the field and how he can respond to that, really quickly. There's a big mental part to the game with him that, is the reason why he's been so productive. So that's been great, but all those guys have really worked extremely hard. That group is a very competitive group right now, and be interesting to see how they work through the rest of the camp.
His willingness and, I guess, success rate as a pass protector. You don't always see that from guys maybe of his size.
Sure. I think in general, you're talking about a situation in the game, specifically like third down or some of those passing situations where those running backs across the league are that's part of the responsibilities. They can do the blitz pickup and find out who's coming in the rush. And with all the different defensive packages that teams run and disguises from fronts and pressure standpoints, inside, outside, that's really a very complex sort of, assignment to be able to handle, especially in those critical situations. And he does an excellent job of deciphering that and really being on the same page with the quarterback as far as, where the extra man is coming from. And then that's also a communication that has to take place between him and the offensive line, and those five guys trying to see the same thing through the same set of eyes. So that's another set of, in the protection world, another set of problems that takes place, and then add a sixth guy who's really behind them from that standpoint, trying to communicate forward as you have, 11 or 10, or depending on how many guys on defense are moving at the same time, pre-snap and post-snap, trying to sort that all out. So it's a pretty complex, event in that situation.
This might be a pretty basic question, but what does an undrafted guy really have to do to make one of your rosters?
Sure. I think, just the same as everybody else, to be honest with you, that's coming in. We're going to start fresh every year. And again, we'll always tell everybody, like we do all the time, it doesn't really matter how you got here. It's what you do when you're here. And that's a great message to give to those guys. And through the, my course and being in the NFL, we've found some of our most impactful players that way, guys that came out of nowhere as far as names are concerned and, stepped in and really took advantage of their opportunity. Doesn't mean that they didn't have the ability beforehand. There's obviously something that we saw that we thought we could develop or use or potentially down the road, maybe 1, 2, 3 years down the road, take advantage of. So, those guys come in, they work hard, they compete every day. It's really no different than, everybody else that's in that room. So, and there's such a fine line, I would say, between, some of the guys that are drafted and some of the guys that aren't, So it's something you're going to look at through fresh eyes as soon as they walk in the door to see how they perform.
Which of those guys have jumped out to you, your undrafted guys?
I think it's just really early to tell and all that stuff. I would say that, for the most part, the guys that are out there are doing a good job of doing everything we're asking them to do from that standpoint. I think as we sort through probably the next couple weeks, or so, and get some pads on, we'll see who kind of goes up or who kind of goes down. But it's really a long haul, consistent thing. You don't want to get too excited over somebody or a situation or a play. It's no different than a particular scheme that you're running, over the course of 2 days, because in 4 weeks it's going to look totally different. So you got to really let it run its course.
Do you think your tight end position is something that's going to develop through training camp and probably the preseason too, to shake out roles and depth and who fits where?
Yeah, I really do. I think that's going to be a big project for us as we push forward to kind of see how those guys all fit. And I think they've done a great job of, stepping into different roles and trying to be in different part of the offensive packages. But all of them, regardless, the message to all of those guys has been, the fundamental part of it. And when we get some pads on, we're going to have to work on the run game and trying to see what they can do in that situation. Obviously, the passing game, the other part of the scheme there for the offense, will take care of itself as we work into some situational football and things like that where those guys have to produce. And it's a little bit more of an opportunity, I would say, for the passing game and the guys with that can run good routes and catch the ball consistently to kind of show through the course of camp. Just overall, there's a little bit more of a passing opportunity in those situations. So we really have to do a good job of trying to balance the run part of it and find out, what that looks like also.
Matt, what are you looking for in the starting cornerback spot opposite Darius Slay? You got a number of options and guys that can do different things, I guess.
Yeah, it's going to be the same. Same as always. The guys that can play consistent. That'll be the biggest thing out there. The corner position in general in football is one that I would say it's a pretty lonely position. You're probably the only guy that looks at the game from the outside in for the most part of it. There might be some situations where you're put put into an inside formation. But most of the game is looked from either the deep part of the field forward or the defensive line forward. Those guys kind of see it from outside in. It's just a totally different perspective. So being real consistent out there on the edge, whether it's in coverage or in run responsibilities, is a real key component for us. And then obviously, as we work further down the line here and find out who fits best situationally, it's going to change based on first, second down, third down, whatever case may be. In that situation, I've also had previous schemes in the past where it depended on where we were in the field, because the field is defended differently based on if you're on the, minus 30 as opposed to the plus 15. So all that will come into effect as we go to try to evaluate those guys.
Just to follow up, one guy who's obviously in the mix, T. Tabor, can you recall what your evaluations were of him coming out and maybe how he's met those or exceeded those?
Sure. Yeah, definitely a guy that we looked at coming out. Real good player, plays extremely hard, works at the game. He's long. He has, just deceiving kind of length and speed. So some of those guys, I know everybody kind of grinds away at the numbers and they look at all that, but there's a difference between a guy that has length of 6 foot and a guy that has a length of 5'9", and his speed. There's a couple inches there, and that relates into his reach and his ability to kind of bracket or cover guys with a broader catch radius because of that length. So, we'll take a look at that as he's going forward. But we have a couple guys in the same situation, obviously, with the addition of, Shed and, all those guys that are in there competing right now, and just roll them through and see how that goes. But definitely, the corner position is another one we're trying to evaluate all those guys. There's a lot of the packages nowadays in the league has multiple corners out on the field, so they can really be in a lot of different positions from that standpoint. So, Nevin Lawson's another guy that's out there, and Agnew, so we'll see how it goes.
How do you measure instinct, or is it just something you see? How do you measure instinct?
Instinct, yeah, it's a good question. Depends on the situation, position, obviously. Some of those cases, when you meet with the guys, you talk to them if they're younger players, you ask them, like, what did you see here? Without really telling them what they should be seeing or what they should be looking at. Sometimes they don't have the answer. It's just something that's just very natural to them, and they have that just instinct to find the ball or fit on the ball or find the open space. It's the same thing with pass rush or offensive line, picking up stunts, things like that up front. Same thing with quarterback play. Just I felt the pressure, something looked different. There's something that they see that they necessarily can't explain that triggers them to do the right thing. And some of that comes with experience. Some of it comes just naturally for them. And then the guys that really develop over time, that have probably seen it before or felt it before, or, have had an awareness to it, then really that overtakes, and we call it instinct, but it's really just because their real muscle memory or their patterns have repeated in that particular situation. So, it's an interesting, the instincts part of football is really interesting. There's a lot of stuff as a coach that you don't see that those guys feel or they see, and, that's probably why they're playing in the NFL, because they have that ability and that kind of natural instinct to recognize that. So it's pretty interesting. Someone had a question over here. Go ahead.
Speaking, you opened practice yesterday with goal line drills. Is that preference to get the intensity going early between the? Yeah,
good observation on that. Goal line is one of those really tricky things in the NFL right now to practice because it's such a critical play. Obviously, the ball could be, the 1 yard line, 2-inch line. Doesn't really matter. But it doesn't come up that often in the game anymore. You're lucky if you get anywhere about 12 reps maybe in the season. I think on the high in the last 14 years, we might have had 18 to 19, even, a little bit further back when a lot more teams ran bigger goal line type personnel. But it's something you can't wait, too late to get into. So I always feel it's just good to get into the goal line situations offensively and defensively, because there are a lot of situation stuff that come up there, and formation identification and different possibilities. In such a critical situation of the game, you got to perform at a high level. So you really need to build that sort of awareness and intelligence here through the course of the next 4 weeks. So you start at day one, mix in a couple plays, couple more plays the next day, and just get those guys feeling comfortable. What happens is as the ball gets closer towards the goal line from a defensive perspective, the anxiety goes up, the just nervousness and obviously wanting to compete to not let them score. From an offensive standpoint, your adrenaline goes up and you're trying to look for matches and mismatches and try to find some advantages in the defense, but everything happens so fast down there because of the shorter space that in that situation, you have to execute at a high level. So you want to start at day one, and it's a good opportunity to do it without pads. I know that kind of sounds backwards, but that way you can really concentrate on the cerebral part of it, and then when you get pads on, then you can really push into the physical part. So it's a real important thing for us, that because when it comes up, you have to perform in that situation, and it could be the biggest game of the year, and you got to come through. So good question.
Is some of that too because this team struggled in short yardage and in goal line so much last year? Is that an added?
Last year. It's just my philosophy, like I stated, and what the importance of that situation is on the field. And one more for you. Yep.
Last year, after Haloti got hurt, the line had a hard time stopping the run. Are you confident that this roster will be able to stop the run a lot better than it did the last half of last season?
Sorry, I got interrupted there one more time. What was it?
After Haloti got hurt last year, this team had a hard time stopping the run.
Sure.
Are you confident that with the roster you have on the D-line, will be able to stop the run better?
Yeah, as far as this year and just moving forward for us with the run game, that's kind of where we are right now. We're on the verge of being able to go out there in pads and really start working on the run game from that standpoint, the physicality of it. And that's a huge point of emphasis for us no matter what. What you would like to get to, and been in this situation before, it's not one player, that really plays the run. It's got to be all of them. They all got to work together. You have run fits, you have coordination of fronts and scheme points and secondary fits and all that stuff, and you just want to make sure you're solid in all of those. And then after that, that's really where we are, is teaching the techniques of how to do that, so that whoever's in there has to do it, and they got to come through. So that's really, we'll get a good start at that. We've been working on it. You like to say that you have a good handle on it, but honestly, until you put the pads on and really take a good look at it, then you'll start to tweak some things and get a good evaluation for those guys of the technique that they're using from that standpoint. But okay, all right, appreciate it. Thanks.